Hello, it is me again. Oh no, what has Barry done this time? This is one of my favourite fables, whatever you wish to call it. It's a brief glimpse of morality, intelligence, cunning, whatever the takeaway for different people, different times, whatever. But without further ado, I shall announce with a voice of thunder. It's the Hare and the Tortoise. Even at a very sort of direct, literal sort of play, it's back when I was a child, a long time. Basically, it all started in 1992. I was born, and then the world was confused. As a child, not running in the happiest of circumstances when you have bullies and nasty people threatening one's existence and livelihood and health and so forth, but on a practical level, on a physical level, regardless of the reason one runs as an action or develops a mindset that goes alongside it, an anxious mindset, a cautious appreciation for being able to run and evade, or a genuine excitement about testing oneself against other racers, or during a cross-country run, or whatever it may be. When I suppose I learned of this fable, this little tale when I was very young, I suppose, but it sort of just sprang into mind again when I was very clearly a child, but an older child somewhat, maybe 10, 11, 12. Maybe it was then when it really sort of, I started to appreciate. I guess I happened across the book and I thought, oh gosh, this is interesting. The Hare and the Tortoise. The Tortoise, I appreciate the Hare, but also the Tortoise, the cunning, the determination, the drive. I can relate to both characters so well. So, yes, there are all sorts of, and I'm sure there have been slightly different tellings and retellings over the, modern decades. But also, oh yes, I do not have the reference right now. I can recall that, as you can imagine, there are regional variants. I think I read about a Russian equivalent of sorts. Again, it's the story could be echoed in all sorts of ways, but it was a very sort of direct equivalent, or may even have predated the Hare and the Tortoise. But if you look on Wikipedia and check out other sources, there are naturally echoes and deliberations and whatnot throughout space and time. So there are, of course, different interpretations and whatnots, but this is Aesop's. The Hare and the Tortoise. Excuse my fan keeps kicking into gear, even though it has finished uploading something. It's probably going to let me just drink some water before I forget. Get through this without too many speech problems and restarts and whatnot. So, Aesop's The Hare and the Tortoise. A hare was making fun of the tortoise one day for being so slow. "Do you ever get anywhere?" he asked with a mocking laugh. "Yes," replied the tortoise. "I'll run you a race and prove it." The hare was much amused at the idea of running a race with the tortoise, but for the fun of the thing he agreed. So the fox, who had consented to act as judge, marked the distance and started the runners off. The hare was soon far out of sight, and to make the tortoise feel very deeply how ridiculous it was for him to try a race with a hare, he lay down beside the course to take a nap until the tortoise should catch up. The tortoise, meanwhile, kept going slowly but steadily, and, after a time, passed the place where the hare was sleeping. But the hare slept on very peacefully, and when at last he did wake up, the tortoise was near the goal. The hare now ran his swiftest, but he could not overtake the tortoise in time. and underneath is the tag, "The race is not always to the swift." That's a very good line. So yeah, I mean, it's a massive tale. That, I mean, it instantly it begs you to consider all sorts of things. Excuse me. I mean, it is very philosophical. Yeah, I mean, we obviously have the tortoise representing immediately certain ideals and wisdoms, and the hare, I mean, I think I've heard some people reference the hare's arrogance or overconfidence, the hare becoming a bit of a gimmick, having a potential for good, but perhaps once able, and that's has given way to this overconfidence, but because it's resting on its laurels, it no longer has any talent. The hare no longer possesses any talent or any usefulness, and is outclassed essentially. And yes, some would say yes, but if the hare was to take the race seriously, the hare may well win easily. Yes, but that is the point. That doesn't change the fact that the hare did not take the race seriously. So yes, maybe the tortoise did not win the race, although arguably the tortoise knew what the hare's personality was like and took advantage or factored that in, but it doesn't change the reality that the race was lost. And so the hare defeated itself through its overconfidence, through its arrogance, through its sense of surety. So the hare, well, it's yeah, literally, figuratively, the hare was not even racing. So the hare thought it could win a race that it was not even attempting to win, because it was so. It's a case of taking the eye off the ball and not developing a strategy, just believing one has immediately the tools needed to accomplish a goal, and not striving towards that goal because the goal is apparently already in their hands. But circumstances can change, and what may seem to be a strong hand can be revealed to be a most poor hand, or cards can find themselves weathered and worn and torn. So yeah, I mean, I started writing a book about my different ideas because it's a massive it's a really deep story, and it's incredibly short in the immediate sense, but start thinking 20,000 different things that you can think of, and with reference to one's personal life and personal convictions and ethics and goals and so forth. It's a charming tale, and it's not at all simple. It's one of the most complicated tales when you think about it. It's very philosophical, and it's very challenging, and it can serve as a bit of a litmus test in some ways. Obviously you have to be careful because people grow differently, so the words and ideals they have are not necessarily a window into their personality and life that they've had, but as a potential litmus test, it's interesting seeing how people interpret the tale, because anything and everything can be as complicated and as joyful and as sorrowful as you wish it to be, or you happen to see it to be. I mean, it's even 20 lines long, but it's a really packed story. And hence why it has continued to attract an audience to this day, because it just grabs people's maybe in some cases it grabs people's fears, but I think it tends to grab people's hopes that they are the tortoise and the hare, you know, the opponents in life are outclassing us, but with cunning and patience we can weather storms, and we can brace ourselves for the storm, and we can carry on. I'm going to find, because this will be a very short video, although I'd happily do, you know, a 20-minute plus video talking about my views, and I probably will end up talking for that long, but let me just find the some of the other versions that I recall. So that was Aesop's The Hare and the Tortoise. I think Wikipedia was a good reference, but maybe not. Number 226 in the Hare Index. Let's just check it's still recording my voice. Oh yes, the crane, as in the bird species. I do remember now. Oh yes, and the Achilles and the tortoise. Law of the handicap of a head starts. The hare and the hedgehog. Festina lentil sounds Italian or Latin. It is getting warmer in England, but it's, yeah, obviously those bringing on some dryness, but the wind is howling. I was speaking to my Hungarian friend. She said she's been having a lot of wind, but somehow she sleeps through it. So she was saying she was joking her windows may be more soundproof, but I was going to ask her. That's the only logical explanation. I was going to suggest that to her, because it was howling so loudly. If her wind is as bad as ours, I mean, I know I have poor sleep anyway, and other people have poor sleep, but even if I could sleep peacefully, it was just rattling windows, and it was just howling and causing all manner of nuisance. I just couldn't sleep. I tried to get to sleep earlier in the day, night or whatever. I think even before midnight I managed to get myself into bed properly, and put my laptop to sleep and so forth, to try and unwind with some music and whatever. And yeah, then I was just my fan's not going to stop, is it? I will keep on talking. And it is trying to compete with the wind, but the wind is actually rather calm, non-existent, in terms of its audible ferocity. It seems to have calmed itself. Now it's my fan, the internal and infernal wind-like. Okay, it's for some reason it's, I don't know why, it's going into overdrive, just because I have a recording app playing, working. Okay, and when you're ready to quieten down a little, that would be good, but why are you not? Okay, I'm just going to check the by the way, thank you whoever's been viewing my videos so quickly. I uploaded we're going on a bear hunt, just refreshing the page, 3rd of May, so that was only yesterday, and already it has 30 views, and I think most of them came from yesterday. And the Hungry Caterpillar yesterday, 3 views already. So thank you whoever's been, I don't know if you've actually been watching a video or just clicked on a video, heard my voice and thought, oh, this is going to be dodgy, and understandably exited, took the first exit. I do not blame you, don't worry. Oh gosh, I really need to see a doctor about this swallowing. But yes, it's good exercise also for acting and for general talking and whatnot. To something I've been making videos. I've always wanted to do some more reading videos, and I've got some spoof ideas and things, etc. And I want other people to share their readings of tales, and yeah, it's excuse me, share, and I would like for other people to share their own recordings of reading out tales and whatnot. But it also helps me to exercise my voice, help with my vocal issues, my speech issues and whatnot. So okay, so blah 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 blah. Okay, there are other variants. This is what Wikipedia is talking about under the heading fault variants. There are other variants. In most of these there is a race between unequal partners, but most often brain is matched against brawn, and the race is won by means of trickery. Broadly, this is of 2 types. Either the slower animal jumps on the other's back, yes, I remember tales like that, or a tail, and hops off at the end when the creature turns away. Oh gosh, that's bringing back memories. What was that story? I remember a famous example. Oh, it was a dragon. Yes, I remember when I was a child. There was oh gosh, I remember now. I remember. There was a I don't know if it was one of the more traditional knights of legend, but a knight of some kind, basically was challenged to a race, or challenged a dragon to a race. Either way, the point is they were racing for whatever reason, for gold, saving the princess's life, saving the knight's own life, whatever. But I remember, yes, I can't remember precisely how it went, because I think it was a bit more expansive than you may be thinking. I think there were maybe 3 levels. At one point the dragon was at the in the sky, at one point on land, but I think for the most part the knight was always was latched onto the dragon's tail. But you know, the dragon, massive size and stature, yeah, and so basically the knight was getting a free ride, and towards the end, obviously, and the dragon was tired, so that works to the knight's advantage for so many reasons. But it's not how you may be thinking. The knights didn't then, you know, didn't start running on foot. No, if I remember correctly, the knight just jumped over the head of the dragon, and or I don't know, somehow discreetly overtook the tired dragon, and yeah, and somehow that was enough to so yeah, that I remember now. That was that's quite a sort of reference to the tortoise and the hare. The dragon, because the dragon, particularly when they were, I don't know, maybe I was soaring across mountains or whatnot. For the human, that would be incredibly difficult. The dragon's just flying, just bolting past the mountains, whatever. And so the knight, being the tortoise, if you will, is just latching a ride onto the dragon. Yes, I remember. It suddenly came back to me now. I've not read that story in maybe two and a half decades. Or so, I don't know. But yeah, that was interesting. Okay, so either the slower animal jumps on the other's back or tail and hops off at the end when the creature turns round to see where his challenger has got to, or else he's deceived by a look-alike substituting themselves along the course. The latter I'm not so familiar with, I don't think. That sounds interesting. Tales with a similar theme emphasising doggedness have been recorded in Native American culture. Okay, it has finally quietened down now. Tales with a similar theme emphasising doggedness have been recorded in Native American culture. Hummingbird and crane agree to race from one ocean to the other. Though Hummingbird flies faster, he stops at night to sleep. Crane, however, flies overnight and is overtaken by Hummingbird later and later during the day, at length coming in first. The ultimate prize differs between versions and includes choice of habitat, the love of a girl, or the right to cut the other down to size. Okay, so that's not quite. There was another version I was looking for, but hang on. Okay, The Hare and the Hedgehog is a Low Saxon fable. Here we go. So, according to Wikipedia, one fine morning, the hare makes fun of the hedgehog's crooked legs, whereupon the hedgehog challenges him to a race to win a golden louis and a bottle of brandy. When the race in the field begins, the hedgehog only runs a few steps, but at the end of the furrow he has placed his wife, who looks very much like him. Oh, so this is like what Wikipedia was mentioning before, the look-alike, the familiar substitute, the substitute version. When the hare, certain of victory, storms in, the hedgehog's wife rises and calls out to him, "Ik ben al here," meaning "I'm already here." The hare cannot understand the defeat. He demands revenge and conducts a total of 73 runs with always the same result. In the 74th race he collapses exhausted and dies. Oh, well, that's a very dire ending. With reference to style, it says the narrator begins mischievously. saying that the story is to be told lying, but his grandfather has said that it must be true, otherwise one could not tell it. Okay, that's interesting. The moral is not to make fun of an ordinary man and marry someone who looks the same. Okay, that's interesting. Backgrounds. The hedgehog is the common man who used to eat the turnips near his house, therefore he considered them his own. The hare, on the other hand, is a distinguished gentleman and cruelly loft to boot. The protagonist thus play the role of a farmer and a landowner. The two moral conclusions are also aimed at this social background. For the hare, one should not make fun of supposedly inferior people, and for the hedgehog, when you marry, you should choose a woman from your own class, preferably one with a similar mentality to yourself. Some social class references apparently. There is also a reference on Wikipedia to the law of the handicap. Now this is interesting, this fits in with some of my observations and theories, and I'm sure you've had similar or your own ideas. I'm sure you've had some ideas of your own. Some very contemporary references as well, so I'll start with those in case you're not yet on the same page, and because they're very interesting, very immediate, as practically everyone on the planet almost across continents has some understanding of the internet, some appreciation of how it works. So hopefully this will be a very accessible reference to start with for everyone. Okay, a modern example, an independent observation given not by the author, the internet situation in the US and Romania. Romania got access to the latest and the greatest equipment in a time which hadn't laid down any cables, but the US has already done that in the past. Upgrades from the American point of view would be a waste of money, as the equipment is already doing the job. So you think about that, and we see examples all the time, and obviously on an individual level as well, but societal as well, and governmental and national, international. So it's slowing down America's infrastructure, and it's going to get even more outdated and antiquated, but at the same time so they see the cost is not the cost is too high. It's not necessarily beneficial, even though long term it certainly would be, surely, but in the here and now it seems oh, it's like waking up to do a certain chore or something. You're not really enjoying. Yeah, I mean, we should clean the whatever, but we can clean the oven tomorrow. It's fine. But say there's a faulty switch or something, and it's consuming electricity even when the oven isn't on properly, so to speak. It's somehow still draining electricity. You should. It's going to cost you $300 to $500 to fix. You should do that immediately, or consider it. But weeks go by, months go by, losing electricity and damaging the environment. So, yeah, a bit like before going back to that example about Romania and US. I remember when I was a child, and the family had the first PC. It was a big, as a child, it was kind of everything was the PC, but obviously, there's the monitor, there's the tower, there's the mouse. I mean, we knew the terms, but it was just, oh look, there's the area, because in those days everything took you had to have a whole room. There was the area, the PC room, the computer room. So it wasn't actually in a separate room as such. It was sort of just kind of opposite the kitchen, but at an angle. But it was, that there's a massive table, and then atop is the monitor, the tower, sometimes hidden, sometimes to the side, whatever. So you're looking at the monitor, that's a computer, but obviously that's actually just a monitor. But at the same time, it is an important peripheral. It is a computer device. It is a computing piece of equipment. But so we did have those, which sadly today with the CRT monitors are considered dreadful for all sorts of reasons. But at the same time, I think, and I may be wrong, but I think it wasn't too long until people started moving to laptops. So that I need to drink some more water because I'm losing my voice. Oh, there's a bird washing in the water. That's cute. Where's my phone when I need it? I heard I was getting some messages on it. So yeah, that's a very individual reference. So even though coming from a much poorer family, not someone who would be not a family that would be able to purchase. Not a banking family or a family. There's politicians in the family. Not even nowhere close to that. Sort of diametric opposite. So even though and also Moore's law, particularly within the computing realm or world. Some say it no longer has much of an effect now, but suddenly back then it was demonstrably in existence. So it's a bit like the tortoise and the hare again, actually, because you've got these along with Moore's law and so forth, the more social variants of Moore's law. You've got the initial cost, so even say bankers at their £1 million a day bonus, whatever, they can right laptop. Oh, we no longer have PCs. Let's just have latest laptops, etc. But then those funds have become focused, dedicated, so they're almost sleeping like the hare in Aesop's fable, the hare and the tortoise. So, but then you've not had any of your resources. You're extremely finite resources, but they've not been allocated to anything. So it's almost like you're walking by a shop which also may be offering discounts or whatnot, because the richer people have helped drive down the price and Moore's law and so forth. But putting that to the side for the moment, you have your resources undedicated, so you have much more finite resources, but this is the first time walking by the shop, so you've never had any kind of computer, say in this example, not a CRT monitor and a chunky tower, not a IBM semi-laptop, whatever, from the 90s or 80s, nothing. So you're walking by for the first time, you can swoop in finite resources, extremely finite resources, but you've got more freedom. You can swoop in and start. That's your starting point is going to be higher than everyone else's, in a sense, not necessarily, but in a certain sense in that moment, but higher than some people's potentially. So even though you are and even though your wealth has not changed at all, you're still at the lower end of the spectrum, still incredibly poor, but you've not gone through all the cycles. You're new to all of this. You're going to benefit from certain upgrades from the get-go, and also so you're quicker to adjust, and so you're able to adapt quicker and so forth. So you're actually in some ways better off. It's strange, but so that's very interesting. So although Romania obtained internet access later, they obviously benefited from, I'm not sure if they're referencing fibre optic necessarily, but more modern and environmentally more environmentally beneficial and cheaper, perhaps. So the US is actually falling behind, maybe not immediately, maybe even not year by year, but certainly decade by decade, because they are not updating infrastructure. And it's the same. It's the same here in England, because we're using telephone lines, and perhaps still are in many places, to connect to the internet. So we were piggybacking off of really old technology, whereas someone who's new, be it Romania or some other nation, they can, even if their resources are much more finite, they can skip all the nonsense about telephone lines and just get straight to the actual internet. So they also mention, let me just check it's still recording, because the fan quietened down quite a bit. So they mention an author gave an example of the law in his original essay. During a trip to London, he wonders why at that time it was still lit by gas lamps rather than electric lights, as were by then common in other European capitals like Amsterdam. His explanation was that London's head start, their possession of street lights before most other cities, was now holding them back in replacing them with the more modern electric lights. As the streets were already lit, there was no pressing need to replace gas lamps, despite the other advantages of electric lighting. So you see again, that's a brilliant real-life example. So, and there's also a link to convergence economics or catch-up effect and resource curse, and they will all be worth a look as well. I was looking for this. I'm sure I remember a Russian. I asked my friend in Belarus, maybe. I'm sure she will know. So I hope that made sense, and I hope you enjoy that.